If you need to isolate part of your image so that you can work on it or apply an effect to it, you'll probably need to use a selection. Now, selections are one of the main pillars of Photoshop. There's a lot to get through. Let's get started. There's many different ways you can select things, but I'm going to divide them up into two different kinds. One is the kind that you draw, like for example, say the ellipse, where you click and draw out a shape, and you can use that. I'll press Ctrl D to deselect. Or there's the other kind where you click on an area and you let Photoshop try and work out things for you. I've just come to the Magic Wand tool, I'll click, and Photoshop selects an area and I can add to it or take away from it, and you do things that way. Let's start off with the shapes that you draw out first. Now, a note to Apple users. I have a PC at home, I also have a Mac at home. I use both for my work. At the moment I'm using a PC, so when I say Ctrl plus D to deselect, can you just pretend I said Command plus D? So whenever you hear Control, just think Command. My apologies for that, but it just gets very confusing to keep on saying the same thing again and again. So, Control plus D to deselect. Right, next thing, let's start going through them. The simplest one is the rectangular marquee tool. I can click and hold and drag out an area, any shape I want. And there's my selection. So what can I do with that selection? Let's come to my paintbrush tool. Let's make it a little bit bigger. And I can draw in it. There you go. Press Ctrl plus Z to get rid of it. If I press Ctrl Shift plus I, it's now inverted selection, so now anything on the outside is now affected. And before I was drawing within the box, now inverted, I'm drawing outside of the box. Ctrl plus Z to get rid of that. Okay, let's just quickly do something with this. Ctrl plus D to deselect. Click the rectangle, drag out a little rectangle, press Ctrl Shift plus I to invert it, and now I'm going to press Ctrl plus backspace. That floods that area with my background colour. Ctrl plus D to deselect. There's a frame. One thing you can use selections for. Okay, don't really need that border, so I'm going to come to my history, and there you go, back to where I was. Okay, quick note to Mac users again. I've got an Apple keyboard right in front of me. I've got a button there, which sometimes people call the Option key. It says Alt on it. So when I say press Alt, I mean the button in between Control and Command. Alright, why did I mention the Shift plus the Alt keys? That's because if I've got nothing selected, Shift and Alt do things to your selection. Let's come back to my rectangular marquee tool. If I press Shift and hold it while I drag out the shape, I get a perfect square. If I let go, any rectangle I want, hold down Shift again, perfect square. Okay, Control plus D to deselect that. Same with my ellipse. If I hold down Shift, I get a perfect circle drawn out. If I let go Shift, I can get any ellipse I want. Hold down Shift again, bang, it goes to a perfect circle. Now, I don't know about you, but I find it a little bit difficult drawing from, say, the top left to the bottom right to draw out a circle shape. I'd rather draw out from the centre. I can do that. Control plus D to deselect that. Now, if I press the Alt key, I drag out from the middle. If I press down Shift at the same time, I drag out a perfect circle from the middle. Once I've got something there, once I've got the marching ants on there, if I then press the Alt key, I won't drag out anything from the middle. I get the little minus sign, and whatever I draw now gets subtracted from my selection. Now the good thing about it, that is that I can change my tools. I can hold down Alt and an area gets subtracted. If I hold down Shift, an area gets added. And you can see I can make quite complicated shapes quite quickly. Now, once I've got that shape, if I hold down Control, I can move the whole thing around. If I press Control plus Alt, I can make a copy of it and move it up there. Okay, it's looking a bit of a mess. Let's go back to there. And Control plus D to deselect everything. Just very quickly, let's come back to our ellipse Selection tool, hold down Alt to select from the center, and I'm going to drag out an ellipse like that. If I right click, I've got all these selections here. Deselect, select inverse, well that's what we were using before. Let's come to there, select inverse. And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to come down to feather. Feather radius 2 pixels. That means that instead of a hard-edged selection, I'm going to get a softer edge selection. 2 pixels, you won't notice anything. Let's really go for broke. Let's go for 50 pixels, yes. And then if I take that, and my foreground color is black, so if I hold down Alt plus Del, I fill with black, Control plus D, and I can get a nice old-fashioned elliptical vignette effect. Now I want to keep this selection video short but sweet because there's a lot to get through. We'll cover some more selection types that you draw out in the next video, but for now I just want to make a little point. Let's call back those marching ants. That's what you call it, that line which goes round, they're the marching ants. Now you can see it's drawing out a clearly sharply defined area, but the fill it made was soft. That's one thing to try and get your head around. Even though you can see the marching ants, the selected area as a hard line, it doesn't necessarily mean that whatever you've selected is a hard area. Look, I'll show you again. If I come to my paintbrush and choose a white paintbrush, let's make it nice and big. I'm not going to get a hard edge there. I see it's getting soft. It fades out. If I press Ctrl Shift plus I to invert, you can see I'm not getting a hard cutoff point there. I'm getting it gradually fading out from one area to another. So that area of marching ants is actually defining quite a soft area. Just be aware of that. It can catch you out occasionally. Okay, let's move on. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, maybe you consider clicking on one of the links below and check out my game called Disco Baby, which is on the iTunes Store or Android stores like Google Play. It has 3 different games in it, a memory game, a maths game for children, and a dance along with me game for toddlers to join in with. Thanks for your time.